Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of What's Happening. I'm George Binns, and we're continuing with our series on the state of the city with the city councilors. And this evening we have with us the Ward 5 city councilor, Kathleen Feldman. Welcome, Kathleen.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So get right into it. What do you think the state of the city is right now?
Well, there's a lot going on. And I think the state of our city, I'm actually really proud of the state of our city at the moment. If you look around us, there has been a lot of, between COVID and a lot of national issues, there's been a lot of lack of communication at some times, and there's been some more controversial things that have been brought forward. And I feel like Beverly has been really clear about it's mitigating the effects of mitigating the spread of coronavirus with through a lot of the administration's preventative measures. I was very proud that we were able to vote on a balanced budget without cutting services, which is something to be, I think, really proud of for our city. And I think that our schools being able to reopen in a hybrid model to have our students in the building was phenomenal. I have friends all over the North Shore in different districts, and I just, as both a parent and an elected official, I feel that we have a lot to be proud of in our city right now.
Okay. And where do you think the city's going to go?
That's a great question. I think we are laying the foundation in a couple of different areas for the city to go for the future, to go in the direction that we are headed right now, which is I see the city of Beverly moving towards a more sustainable economy and future in terms of setting up the infrastructure to be the type of city where people want to buy homes and live in and raise their children in. And I see that I ran on the platform of kind of focusing on the fiscal responsibility, but also traffic and pedestrian safety, education, and environmental sustainability. And I think all three of those things, we are making huge strides in the right direction, laying the groundwork for those to keep building on making Beverly the type of city that people want to build their homes in. And we see that with the rising home prices here in Beverly. It's really, everything's going over asking, and it's really the type of community that people want to move to and live in. So I think we're headed in the right direction, and I hope that's the case.
Well, let me put a little challenge to that. Being a little longer in the tooth than you are, AARP comes through regularly with a blog or two. And one of the recent ones they came through with is a question about the sustainability or the livability of a city. And being curious, I clicked on Beverly, and what do we get? We get a rating of 52. And for comparison, I did Danvers and Salem. Danvers is 53, which probably no difference, but Salem is 57. And I would imagine that they would have a more challenging environment to work with than we had. And when I look at the numbers, specifically Beverly is very low in affordable housing. So it may well be that this is a desirable place to live, but at the same time, I've got a kick that I've been working on of the complete cities concept, where everybody that works here should be able to live here.
Yeah.
And that's not quite happening. So one of the things that I think needs to be worked on is what can we do with the zoning, for instance, to make affordable housing that you can really afford, not just the Mickey Mouse definition that the state uses. How can you make housing that's really people can afford to live in?
I completely agree that affordable housing is and should be a priority, especially moving forward. I have to admit, it seems like right now, with the pandemic and the last 8 months, it's almost been like everything's like on fire. And so when I was talking about the balanced budget and everything, it's easy to lose sight of some of the more long-term priorities that I know that the other counselors and I are definitely in support of. And I forgot to mention that, I'm really hopeful that something like the Harbor Light partners, the reuse of the Briscoe building to be affordable housing is going to make an impact, and we'll be able to show the community what we can do with affordable housing and how it is a benefit to our community as a whole. So I'd like to see more projects like that. I'd be happy to take on some of the introducing them to the council if partners like that come up. And so we have work to do, and that is obvious, and I can see why Salem would have a higher rating in that regard in terms of affordable housing. And I mean, there's a give and a take. There's things about Beverly that I'd like to keep Beverly and I think are better than Salem. But I think on the whole, that is one area that we definitely need to work on, is the affordable housing aspect. And I'm hoping that some of these infrastructure improvements that we're making, I see something like the police station, a new sustainable, like zero net cost building moving forward, is laying that type of infrastructure that we can make in the community to then move to affordable housing within that community. Things like also free full day kindergarten. That was a long time in coming, and that's an aspect of life that's not housing necessarily, but makes Beverly a more affordable city to live in when you're not paying for kindergarten, or when you have a top-notch, state-of-the-art police building with the infrastructure to support these new people in our community.
I think the other issue that comes up on this affordable housing is, Harbor Lights is working on the low end of the problem, but yet in the middle, people are still having a problem. And again, one of the blogs I get is something called the Next Door, and the Prospect Hill, where I live, has got its own Next Door following. And lo and behold, today one of the articles showed up about how do you find an apartment you can afford to live in, and they're talking, 15, 16, $1,700 a month as affordable, and or what the going rate is. And one of the particular ladies that was commenting and said, I just got my rent raised by $50 in the middle of the COVID problem. So the people in the service industry, I think, are being left by the wayside in a lot of this. And when we had the discussion with Paul Glancy on the same subject, he was pointing out that some of his employees come from as close to the New Hampshire border as you can get, for the obvious reason. So it's an area that I think needs to be worked on, and I think the problem is, to some extent, zoning. So one of the questions would be, what would you think about changing the zoning so that it would allow 3-deckers or duplex housing instead of taking the existing ones and converting them into condos?
I would be really open to hearing more about that. I know that in a lot of the older houses, the mid-century houses in Raymond Farms, a lot of them are single-floor residences to start, and they really, that neighborhood, which is right in Ward 5, has really pioneered that concept here in Beverly a couple of decades ago, honestly, because and a lot of them have built on, instead of that ranch style, and made a second floor. And there were so many houses that I knocked on doors while I was campaigning, and spoke with residents that, the mother or father lived upstairs and the family was raising their family down below. And I think that type of conversion in a residential neighborhood, I would be really open to that, the idea of that. I know that's happening a little bit, and I've gotten actually a couple of constituent concerns about houses that might be doing that without actually having the permitting. So I know this is on everyone's radar in terms of, are we going to get behind this as a city and actually zone for this, or because the demand is obviously there. So I would be really open to it. I don't have any at the moment. I don't know enough about it. I don't have anything in front of me to actually vote on or research, but I would be open to that idea.
Well, nothing's being brought up at any level right now.
Don't make me vote on it, George. I said, don't make me vote on it right now.
No, but I think these are the kind of what I consider outside the box thinking, that we've got to do something different. The classic example in my own personal case is I bought my house a little over 50 years, or 53 years ago, and I paid $32,000 for it. And that was a stretch for me because I wasn't making $32,000 a year, which used to be the old guideline. And I went through the arithmetic of taking the consumer price index and escalating that price. So that $32,000 in 1967 would be about $250,000 right now. And if I believe Zillow, it says my house is worth over $800,000.
Yep.
Which the difference between the inflation, which you get with the CPI, and the other prices, really the appreciation of the property, or the fact that, as you said earlier, it's a desirable place to live, and therefore the demand for housing will drive up the price. But at the same time, you run into the problem of what about everybody else? Right?
Yeah.
And the ground rules are changing, because I seriously doubt that somebody that's earning $800,000 a year is going to want to buy my house. I mean, that's a different ballgame. And there are other issues too that I think we're concerned with. I know Boston is pushing TOD, the transportation-oriented development, and Beverly with 5 railroad stations is a prime target. And the question becomes one of, do we end up building high-rises or multifamily dwellings around every one of the railroad stations? And that gets back to the question, what's the character of Beverly? What's going to happen to it? What's the direction we really want to go in? So
I definitely understand that. We're right by the North Beverly commuter rail station, and I actually work at the Cumming Center. So I am a commuter, but I'm one of those people that lives and works in Beverly, which I'm so lucky and really blessed to do. But I see something like, I know the accessory dwelling unit. I think that's the term that we're looking for in terms of making current structures, current single families into multiple dwellings. I know that it has to be kind of one or the other, and I do see in terms of development and these condos going in versus something like accessory dwelling units. And I think that, I look at Salem, and I know you mentioned that they got a higher rating, but about a year ago, I believe their city council actually voted on the accessory dwelling units, the rezoning, and they voted it down. And I was actually really, really surprised about that, because, citizens of Beverly, Salem, all along the North Shore are very much not in support of more condos being built, I think, around these railroad stations. But that's really, if we want to make affordable housing and we want to make it based on where we're near transit hubs, then I think that is why I do believe something like an ADU rezoning might be well received here in Beverly after the development on Rantoul and the condos, and how I know that pretty much all of the my constituents are concerned about overdevelopment. So I think this could be a happy compromise to creating more affordable housing, but not creating it in a way that changes the actual character of the Beverly we know and love.
And I think that gets to the other issue of the Plan Beverly that has been exercised around town for about a year and a half now, to maybe 2 years, of where do you think we want to go? And I think the couple of meetings that I've been to on that seem to be driving in the direction of more condos around the downtown area, the area on the other side of the river. And I think that's being pushed. They're talking about taking out Monahan's and the gas station and a few other buildings down in that area and converting them into some sort of development. And one of the issues that came up is, okay, we can build condos to the river's edge and call that oceanfront property or something like that. But we got into this issue with the old McDonald's and converting that into a restaurant. And does that really provide access to the waterfront that Beverly is noted for? So it keeps getting back to this question of what's the character of Beverly and where do you think we ought to go with it?
Well, character, I think, is a reflection of, there's a combination of things. You know, there are some things that it's a living idea and it changes with the times to a certain extent. So I don't think that, in some ways, I don't think that we need to completely be resistant to the idea of change in a lot of different areas, because that's just part of keeping with the character of Beverly, of being, you know, open-minded and looking towards the future. I think that's part of, baked into the character of a city as well, the people that make it up, and not being resistant to change. But that being said, I think that the downtown area, there has been, my husband, I'm not from Beverly originally, but my husband grew up here and in the Cove, and he, you know, I know that the Rantoul condos get a bad rap, but what was on Rantoul prior to the condos was really, the condos are an improvement to Rantoul on the whole. We have a bunch of wonderful restaurants, and we have a bunch of businesses and people that can walk to the commuter rail station now to work from home, most likely, unfortunately. But I think that there does come a time that I think we've made those improvements, and I think that we might be reaching the point where, to keep with the character of Beverly, that we look towards what's the next thing, what's the next way we creatively solve this problem. And I do see a lot of promise in something like ADUs and keeping with the character of Beverly. I'm not sure if that answered your question, but I see it as a moving goal, basically.
Well, I think we all recognize that the character of Beverly is changing. If you go back far enough, it was a mill village. All those condos on the lower end of Rantoul Street used to be mills. And that was the character of the city. And the shoe was a factory, tied into the shoe industry throughout this part of New England. And all that disappeared. And now it's something else. And I think Cummings and the other development up on Dunham Road are making tremendous progress, in Cherry Hill too, of changing the character of the city in a good direction, where people can work here and live here at the same time and get away from this commute. Because I know I got involved with going to Newton Wellesley Hospital for a while, and no matter what time of the day you pick, it's a traffic jam, and 128 is a long, narrow parking lot. So yeah, we've got access to the highway, but it's not really moving very well. So yeah, the character of the city is changing. But on the other hand, I think we still have to have some direction as to where we want it to go. And I guess one of the other issues that keeps coming up is there is a conservation commission.
Mhm.
Not a conservation, I'm thinking of. The charter commission is the one I'm thinking of. That is
Oh. Mhm.
in some sort of
Yep,
limbo
charter.
right now, like lots of things. But at
Mhm.
the same time, I think there needs to be some discussion of what kind of city government do we have? We went through a major change going from a relatively strong city council and relatively weak mayor to a strong mayor, weak city council.
Mhm.
And not sure how you feel that's working out. Should we go to a stronger city council? Should we even consider a city manager?
So that's a great question. I know that during the campaign, this came up a lot. I know it is a city charter year, which is where we have the opportunity every 10 years to open it up and look at that. And I know that is a function of the council in terms of looking this over and forming a charter commission. And I do believe we have the interest to be moving forward with at least reviewing it. It doesn't mean that it will be rewritten. But I think that it's worth a fresh pair of eyes, especially with, there's 3 new city councilors, and almost everyone is on city council is new since the last one was written. So I think that between a new administration and a new council, it's worth a look. I recognize that we did need, at the time of the last city charter review, we were in the position where we needed a strong mayor charter. That has been evidenced by the comeback through Scanlon economically. We have a AAA bond rating, which is fantastic. We are one of the only cities on the North Shore that's doing as well as this financially, and we can give a lot of that credit to that strong mayor charter in terms of Scanlon and then Cahill. But whether we're on a good enough terms where we maybe want to revisit that structure and that dynamic, I think that's definitely worth a look. And I don't know where we stand on where that charter commission is. So I think it probably, like I said, there's been so much going on with the pandemic that a lot of projects that could take a back burner kind of have. But that is definitely something that came up a lot during the
election season last year. And for better or for worse, right now, because of the strong mayor charter, all of the blame and the credit really falls on the shoulders of the mayor. And I don't necessarily think that's something that should be sustainable, could be sustainable really for a healthy government.
Yeah. Well, I think part of the problem is that very little initiative seems to be coming out of the city council, and yet there are a bunch of very smart people sitting on the city council, and I think they have some ideas, and I would like to see some of them develop into something useful. I'm not too keen on the idea of all these resolutions, although you finally did get the resolution supporting the first arrivers on the scene and the police.
First responders, yep.
And that finally passed. But I think a lot of those resolutions have no teeth in them, like the one that was passed that being a person of color is a health hazard. What's the city of Beverly going to do about that? I mean, it's a nice thing to say, but how do we fix it? And
I can hear what you're saying in regards to, and I've had that feeling when I voted on some of these resolutions. And one of my questions has been, well, what are we saying? Is this a springboard for something? And I think I've been reassured that for the most part, I look at the city council and some of our resolutions as a starting point to show support, because we are the body that votes on the budget. So if it starts with the support of the council and it moves into different departments and something they want to build into their budget for the coming year, they already know in advance that they have the support of the council if it's some program or something that relates to that type of resolution. And at the same time, I feel the frustration as a city councilor that, you know, I have a full-time job. I actually work 9 to 5 for, you know, another company. So it often is frustrating, as I know we all of the councilors, we all have jobs, and because aside from our job as city councilor. So I think there's not enough hours in the day for all the ideas and the energy that I think we have. And it would be a lot easier if that was my full-time job, because I could do a lot more. I know if it was more of this is what I do, 9 to 5. So I do feel that frustration, and I mean there's lots of things idea-wise that I think each one of us individually has our own projects that we think would be great, but there are not enough hours in the day, unfortunately.
Yep. Well, we've just about run down the half hour, and Kim will get very excited with me if I run over. So is there any closing remarks that you'd like to make?
No, I just like to thank everyone. I've had a lot of people reach out in it's been the first 10 months of being an elected official have been incredibly interesting. And I think I've really run the gamut of problems that could pop up. And it's been an exciting time and a challenging time. And I really appreciate everyone's feedback and support that I've gotten over my first year in office.
Yep, and we'll do this again probably next year when the election time comes around.
Yeah, I really appreciate being on the show. So thank you so much for inviting me.
Well, thank you for joining us. And ladies and gentlemen, this will be one of the many sessions we're going to do on the state of the city. Stay tuned. Thanks for showing the evening with us.